But I will say that the real help came when I had maximized my own abilities. I couldn't YouTube my way out of it, but I knew there were pacing issues. There were other issues. I just didn't know how to fix them. And so I hired a
Welcome back to the WaxQuill podcast. Woohoo!
Guys, I'm glad you're here. Today I'm talking to author Demi Winters.
So I'm the author of The Road of Bones. It's a Viking romantacy series. The first book has been republished through Penguin Random House. So I'm just gearing up for the second book to re-release February 4th. I had a bit of a roundabout career trajectory, I suppose. I started in self-publishing and I was discovered by an agent and the books were sold to Penguin Random House, and it's been a bit of a roller coaster ride.
So, how long since you published them by yourself to when they got picked up by Penguin?
So The Road of Bones came out in June 2023, and Kingdom of Claw, the second book, came out at the end of February last year. And then in March, the series was purchased.
Oh, that's not very long.
No, it was the year.
How did the agent reach out to you? What was that like? Tell me the moment.
The moment was, is this a joke? The moment was perfect timing because The Road of Bones had been self-published for about 6 months. It was like November 2023. And I was starting to get requests from international publishing houses. I was getting, requests for German translations. And I'm like, I have no idea how much people would sell these rights for and how to negotiate contracts or any of this. And I have no desire to do this on my own. So I started querying just for an agent to help me with the foreign transaction deals. And during this time of querying, my agent found me on TikTok. She reached out to me and I was like, oh, did another agent pass my info along? Because it was such strange timing. And she was like, no, I found you on TikTok and I saw all the comments. And I was like, this is so weird because I'd actually looked at her profile when I was querying and I was like, oh, she would be perfect match, but she wasn't accepting queries. So anyway, I explained to her everything about, I'm looking for help with the foreign deals, but at that point hadn't even considered selling the book series, but she thought that it would have a good chance of selling based on what she'd read and all the positive feedback I'd had and stuff. And the other thing is because A Fate Inked in Blood was about to be released, which is also, so that's by Danielle Jensen. It's another Viking romantacy series that was really, really getting hyped up. And she's like, people are going to be hungry for more of this. And your book, has that. So I think it was just, good timing with that. And based on my 2 weeks of querying, I don't think that's a world I would survive in. It's pretty brutal.
Amazing. That's like every author's dream, I think.
I know. I feel very lucky.
So clearly you wrote an incredible book.
I mean, I hope so. I liked it. It's my first book I've ever written, but I read voraciously and I'm really picky about what I read. And so I put all the things I do like into the book. But when I put it out there, I'm like, who knows? Maybe other people won't share my taste. So it was all just very surprising that, in fact, people do share my taste.
When did you start to write?
2021. So I wrote stories a lot as a child, but they never went anywhere. I always struggled to finish. I would get a few chapters in and just discard it. And then I ended up going into the sciences. I did a lot of scientific writing, technical writing, condensing extremely difficult things down into really simple terms. And then after that, I'd started this food blog for fun, but then I saw people were making a living with it. So I built that up into a business and I was able to transition from grad school into running my food blog. So at that time I was writing blog posts. They ranged from personal blog posts to, by the end, blogging had evolved away from the diary style writing into technical search engine optimized stuff. And so I was really losing my creative spark with that. And that's when I started thinking, hey, why don't I try writing stories again? So I've been writing my whole life, but not fiction. So I started writing the book in 2021 and it took me 2 years to finish The Road of Bones. It took me about 2.5 years to finish Kingdom of Claw. I'm about a year into book 3.
How did you get the idea for these books? Were you reading that other series and that kind of sparked it, or something completely different?
No, so the other Viking romantasy book that I mentioned, it didn't come out till after mine. I didn't know about it at all. So it didn't influence me in any way. I was reading a lot of Sarah J. Maas while I was food blogging and just looking for more of that and struggling to find something that combined the character development, the romance, and the world building. I felt like it was hard to get those three things. And so I really wanted to try it for myself. It's very much a continual labor of love, of lots of brainstorming sessions, lots of different drafts, throwing drafts out, starting over. Every time I would do a pass, it would get like another layer of the story, of the world building, of the character development. This world is set in a place inspired by Iceland. And that came to me while I was watching drone footage of a volcano erupting. And I was like, someone needs to do a fantasy book set in Iceland, or like inspired by, because they have volcanoes and they have glaciers and black sand beaches and fjords. And it's just such a beautiful looking place. It just really spoke to me.
So I've been studying Save the Cat and, looking how to incorporate the pacing, the beats that other
Yeah.
people really like. How did you write the book? Did you study writing beforehand? I mean, obviously you'd already written several things, but writing a fantasy book is very different from writing the technical stuff with the
Yeah.
characters and the arcs and blah, blah, blah. So how did that come about?
So I'd struggled to finish stories as a child. And I was like, I need to approach this in a different way. So I had the ending figured out and I watched some YouTube videos. I think there was one that was a 27-point story where like they break it down chapter by chapter, which beats you should be hitting. And that guided my outline. But I will say that the real help came when I had maximized my own abilities. I couldn't YouTube my way out of it, but I knew there were pacing issues. I knew there were other issues. I just didn't know how to fix them. And so I hired a developmental editor. I used Reedsy. And I'm not going to lie, she wasn't cheap, but I looked at it like taking a course. As you know, in my blogging career, I've taken many courses on videography and all this stuff. So I was like, you know what? A developmental editor is like that, but just for writing. And so it was the best money I ever spent. Did all the homework she assigned me. I read all the books she assigned me. I really took her advice on not everything, because she did tell me to take certain things out. And I was like, no, I'm not going to take that out. And it ended up being a reader favorite point. So you know what to keep. But she helped me so much with understanding how to write a book that's highly readable. I was majorly having problems with pacing is the main thing. And nothing will drain the life from a really good book more than pacing, I think. Like you can love the characters and everything, but if the pacing is too slow, it just sucks the joy out of reading it. And I was really willing to do massive rewrites if it required. And it did require massive rewrites, but she really helped me with the pacing and writing a really compelling book.
Well, and here's a question. I'm writing a book. I'm using the Save the Cat, but it's going to be the first in a series. So it's interesting that you said it's a
Mhm.
fantasy romance novel, right? Well, aren't you supposed to have like two arcs if it's in a series? Aren't you supposed to have two so that one can carry you to the next book? How did you do that?
Yeah, so the same developmental editor asked me, how does your series end? And I said, I don't know. She's like, well, you should probably know that you can set it up properly. And so I sat down and I mapped it out point by point. I'm not following some big, save the cat for the overall series. I follow something similar book by book. And another thing that is, I think, important to me, I know a lot of authors don't do this, but it's really important to me that each book has its own resolution, because it's so frustrating to get to the climax and then it just breaks off in a cliffhanger. I think that you need to give your readers some, you've been dangling the carrot, you got to let them get it at the end. And then you can dangle a new carrot after that, that one makes them want to read the next one. So that was another thing that she had pointed out to me, is that mine ended in a cliffhanger, because that's what I read a lot of in romantacy. I'm really glad that I gave resolution. It's certainly not completely resolved, but the main character's main goal is resolved. And then a new thing comes up, a new set of problems that need to be resolved in book 2. So, because my book is Vikings inspired, it's basically every book is a progression towards Ragnarok. And so every book things get a little worse. And at book 5, it's going to be like the ultimate resolution of it all. So that's how I've approached it. For the romance, though, it's hard. I always find the romance is the hardest to fit in, because I do take a very plot forward mindset with this stuff. But there's a book called Romancing the Beat, and it's so helpful for plotting romance. Sometimes I will use that and I'll map out the romance progression and where I am, sometimes the book won't finish the romancing the beat sheet. It won't finish all the beats. It will end with them having a disagreement, or it will end with them midway through the romance progression, if that makes sense.
But you make sure that you come to a resolution, even if you don't resolve everything that's going on.
So I make sure the character's goal is resolved. So in book one, the character's goal is to get to a certain city. And so she gets to the city. She finds that it doesn't have the safety that she wants. And so that's the new problem. Her goal is resolved. She made it there, but it's totally not what she was expecting. And she now needs to find safety leading into book two.
Does your romance start from book one? It does,
Yeah.
right?
And spoiler warning, the twist in book one is that her first love is not the main love interest.
I love those. I love
I
it when
know.
that happens.
I love those too. So that's like the big twist. So then book two is really more like the start of this slow burn, but it was more towards like friends, although there's mutual attraction in book one. Then in book two, Mr. Love Interest number one has turned out to be not a good guy. And so the real guy kind of comes in and everything progresses from there. It was very hard to write because having the first guy as a believable love interest was a hard sell. So a lot of readers were like, oh, thank God that guy's gone. But then other readers really liked him and they got their feelings hurt. There's a small subset, and it's because of the way I wrote him is kind of like it's kind of messing with people because in romantacy there's a lot of alpha male love interests who have all these red flags, but you just overlook it because it's fiction, it's romantacy. Like he's super possessive and he's violent, and so what I did is I planted these little red flags, but that people are going to overlook because of the genre. But then there gets to be a point where the red flags are too red. He starts saying, I don't want you talking to this other guy. And then readers are like, oh, wait a minute, that's going a step too far. And it progresses from there. So, like, some people did get their feelings hurt, and the book two just helps repair their broken hearts.
Brandon Sanderson, he does his lectures on those, and when he talks about romance, he says that you have to be really careful with a love triangle because people will get mad at you.
I don't consider it a love triangle because she's never at one point considering both guys. She's only with this
No.
guy. But some people do consider it a love triangle. They'll just opt out of the book because of it. It's not going to be for everyone.
Does the love interest have an arc as well, or is it just her arc?
The love interest has an arc, and the failed love interest has an arc. They both had POVs in book one. I would say the failed love interest had more than the actual love interest, but it was important because there's this pivotal scene where something is revealed at the very end for the real love interest. My developmental editor said, it's better to have some other POVs from him throughout so that it's not just this convenient, oh, look, we just throwing in a POV from him here. So yeah, so there are 4 point of views. There's like the main character who gets like 70% of them. Then there's the assassin chasing her. And then there's the 2 love interests.
So your book got nominated for an award.
Yeah.
I was thinking, oh, in order to get nominated for anything, you have to like enter into a competition. Apparently, that's not how it works. So tell me how that happened.
So long story short, it was from Book of the Month, which is a subscription box. And there's someone at my publisher who their entire job is to pitch books to different subscription boxes. And so I was absolutely floored when I found out that my book was picked for November 2024 Book of the Month box, which I was shocked. I don't know if you can see, I have a lot of Book of the Month on my shelf. So I'm a subscriber, and I was like, this is the only box I subscribe to. So I was pretty excited.
So when you write your book, how do you go about it? What is the process? Do you dictate? Do you type it up on your computer, write by hand? Do you write 10 minutes a day, 10 hours a day?
I'm still figuring it all out myself because I've only finished 2 books. So I'm trying to experiment and find out what is the most effective way for me to get words on paper. For the first 2 books, it was such a learning process of just how to write a novel, how to structure it, how to write it, how to keep the pacing. So for book 3, what I did is I wrote an outline and then I went back through and I made it extremely detailed. It ended up being 90 pages, and then I sent that to my editor and I was like, do you see any like red flags Like, I just didn't want to do these huge rewrites again, but I've ended up having to do rewrites anyway. So I don't know if I've found the most effective way. Then I wrote my first draft, I went through it a few times. I think it was like third draft. I sent it back to my editor. She sent it back to me. And now I've done more massive rewrites, and it's been like 4 months of just editing and rewrites. And I think it's just the nature of my plots are just really twisty and detailed and just always going to require rewrites. But yeah, I write full time now. I write from 9 to 5 or 9 to 4:30. I go for a walk in the middle of the day, help to clear my mind. I treat it like my job because it is my job now.
When did you make the transition to writing full time for your
Yeah,
books?
I didn't want to stop my food blog, but I had an extreme case of burnout. I couldn't even look at the blog. I had to just take a few months off. But then the months kept stretching on, and I was starting to get stressed out about it. I was writing full time, basically. I just swapped from doing the food blog to writing. I didn't expect anything to come of the writing. It was just very therapeutic, very cathartic. The spark I got from the creativity was what I needed after the burnout. It was like bringing joy back to my life, bringing the little spark I needed. So, but then it started to drag on, and I made a few attempts coming back to the food blog, trying to rejuvenate my interest. I tried different video formats, I tried different recipe types, and I was just so enamored with the writing that I couldn't do it. So, when I got my book deal, it gave me the freedom to sell my blog. So I was able to sell it over the summer. Anyways, it's so good to move on from that.
I do want to ask, does your book have spice in it?
Yeah, my books, they both do. And
Have you gotten pushback from that?
no, I mean, I was like, so Demi is my pen name, and I originally wanted to have a pen name to keep that separate from my blog persona, full legal name and stuff. So, but like my mom keeps telling everybody that I wrote a book. Uncles and cousins and things have read these books with this spice in it, and I'm getting more comfortable with just owning it and being fine with it. But that's personally something that I like to have in a book that I'm reading, and so it was just like a no-brainer that it was going to go into my book.
Gotcha. And then with violence, I mean, they're Vikings. So is there like a high gore, high violent
Yeah, there's
level?
gore. So initially I wrote it, I think I was like a little more timid about it, but then after I let it sit for a bit, I was like, no, this is Vikings. Like, you got to go for it. So, it's pretty graphic in some parts, especially the first chapter. I feel like the first chapter is like a warning. If you can't handle this chapter, just DNF it now. So
What homework assignment would you give to the people listening to help them on their writing journey?
I thought about this, and it made me just think of the homework my developmental editor gave me, and that was surprisingly helpful. So she had me identify plots in movies that were similar to my plot. And so like I said, my book 1 had like a chase plot. My book 2 had like a magic training plot. And so for book 1, I watched The Fugitive with Harrison Ford and Tommy Lee Jones, and that helped me realize that like you're always getting Tommy Lee Jones's perspective and all that he's doing to try to hunt down Harrison Ford. So that helped me understand that I needed the assassin's point of view. Then in book 2, I watched The Empire Strikes Back, where Luke is training with Yoda. And so I like watched it and I made note of every Yoda scene and I like mapped them out. And it really, like, if you see how they put these plots together, it can help you so much with your own plot. So my homework would be to like identify a movie that has a similar-ish plot to what you're writing, and then just watch it and analyze it for like who gets different point of views and like what is the structure of conflict. For example, in The Fugitive, I noticed that Harrison Ford and Tommy Lee Jones have 3 separate meetings, and I was like, oh, see, this fit with what my developmental editor said about the antagonist and the protagonist, 3 separate meetings, and they're escalating each time, and at the third meeting it like gets resolved. So yeah, that's my homework.
Awesome. Everybody, make sure to follow Demi Winters on Instagram, TikTok, all of the things. The links will be below.
Thank you so much for having me.